Pozdrav svima i dobrodošli u video podcast muzeja PEEK&POKE. Ovo prvo zvanično izdanje video podcasta otvaramo uz jednog posebnog gosta, gospodina Stevena Browna, osnivača kultne grupe Tuxedomoon, cijenjenog solo autora omiljenog među ljubiteljima alternativne muzike. Nakon 4 godine Steven Brown nanovo je posjetio ove krajeve. Povod je serija koncerata, počevši s nastupom u Pogonu u Rijeci, nakon toga s Blaineom Runningerom u Beogradskom domu omladine i naposljetku u Pakracu u Vladičanskom domu. Povod opet cijeloj toj priči je i novi album Stevena Browna, album In This Very World, o kojem ćemo s autorom prigodno popričati u podcastu. With us here today is the one and only Mr. Steven Brown, co-founder of the legendary group Tuxedomoon, cultural activist and a respected solo artist. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Thanks a lot. Good to be here.
Yeah. Always a pleasure. Let's talk about your new album called In This Very World, your new musical journey, and if I may say, a sonic diary, which is political, intimate, and open to the world, offering a solution. Would that description make sense?
Offering a solution?
Yeah.
What are the solutions? I missed that part.
Please tell us. What is it about?
Why do you say solution?
I don't know. It sounds like messages. Like giving some kind of insight into the world as can be.
Okay.
May not be as horrible as it is maybe at the moment.
Well, that's good to hear. I didn't think of it that way. But yeah, okay. There are some kind of hints and cues for sure, like the poetry references to the poet Emerson about stars, looking at the star. He said, when you look at the stars, he says, when you're feeling down and out and low, and just go out in the night sky and look at the stars, and you'll feel better. And also, when you look at the stars, no harm can come to you. You know, it's like somehow the stars take care of you in a way. You know, it's obviously poetry, but it somehow makes sense. And so, yeah, I think that's a good advice for people. If you can still see the stars wherever you might be, I think it's good advice to just sit out in the night and watch the stars for a while. But yeah, that's one cue. That's one possible solution, yeah.
Okay. We're going to go back to the stars a little later, but the title of the album, which comes from poet William Wordsworth.
Mm-hmm.
We have a song, Wordsworth, which refers to the poet, and there is one line which caught my eye, which is quite frightening. Say, we find our happiness or not at all. Is it necessary to confront the world in order to achieve happiness, whether personal or kind of collective happiness?
According to him, that line comes from the French Revolution. That's the name of the poem, the French Revolution. He was kind of fascinated by the beginnings of the French Revolution. He was in France for a while, you know. But I assume that he's referring to that, you know, at that moment there was so much euphoria and so much hope for a new world being created, etc. But then there was also the downside that either it works or it doesn't work. So I guess that's where he was coming from in that particular poem. I just liked it for the turn of phrase and also because it fit a piano melody that I had. And so from the whole poem, I just took that two sentences, you know, because they fit into this line. And I thought that was enough because most of the song is instrumental. As you know, it's piano and violin and trombone and cello and trumpet. That's basically instrumental except for that one line, which I thought kind of was a nice balance.
But it kind of gave this tone and colored this song.
Sure, of course, yeah, yeah. It's kind of ambiguous, you know. It's neutral. It's not good or bad.
inspiring.
Yeah.
Very much so, yeah. And speaking of the stars, what is it with stars apart from watching the night sky that intrigues you? Like, as you said, like the stars, when you watch the stars, and you refer also to Ralph Waldo Emerson. You actually pointed out that book Nature. How did this connect with your idea of or perception of the stars?
Well, it is his idea. I literally quote him when you look at the stars. How does he say it? When you watch something like when you watch the stars, they watch after you, which I thought was funny. But where I live, I'm semi-rural, and I can still see stars. Every it gets less and less as the electricity and street lights come in. But every night I watch the stars, and it's just fast. I don't understand what's going on, but it's fascinating. And the moon, the movements of the moon, and etc. And then I was aware of that poem, and once again I thought I would use it in a song. But that's all. That's just his sentiment, mirrored my own, and so I thought, well, why not quote one of the great ones and take advantage of something already written by somebody
Yeah.
who knew how to write.
And also thinking like the universe, can it be like, is it more like welcoming, less threatening than the planet we live on? What do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah, exactly. He said, and it's true. I mean, we just take it for granted, all the stars, all the stars. But he said if they only appeared once in 1,000 years, the stars at night,
Mm-hmm.
it would be the stuff of legend. It would be, people would talk about it as having seen the city of God, because, and it's true when you think about it. If there were no more stars, you would really miss them, you know. And if you saw them once, you would never forget it. So I was trying to capture that.
It's also like a spiritual thing in the sense that like
I would say
observing,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. Most of his writings is kind of mystical, spirituals. Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of Mexico, I remember 4 years ago when we met and you told me this little story how you hitchhiked to Mexico for the first time when you were in your youth, and in a kind of adventurous way, not knowing where the day will take you, like 5,000 miles. And today you live in Mexico for many years now, in this town, Oaxaca. Is that how I
Yes.
pronounce it? And what is it with Mexico that fascinated you or fascinates you? Because I feel that it's kind of present also in the music somehow all the way through. This
Mm.
leitmotif. Can you tell us a little bit about how
You feel the musically, you mean, or
somehow, maybe on a subconscious level, somehow, even though it's kind of Tuxedomoon initially, and your work is multilingual, and Mexico somehow stands out, even though I wouldn't, maybe I wouldn't know that it's Mexico, but somehow now that, for example, in the context of this very album, and it's kind of pointed out. So, what is
Mhm.
it with Mexico, and why this particular town where you chose to live?
Well, that's pretty ironic because that particular town is where I hitchhiked to in
Ah,
1972. That's nothing to do with it. It's just, well, people say there are no coincidences, but as we were very young, we had cousins, family in Arizona. And so we would go visit our aunt and uncle and cousins, and they had a little shack in Mexico. So we'd go over the border down to what's called the Sea of Cortez. It's this huge, long body of water alongside Baja California. And for a kid, well, even we're like teenagers, it was fascinating. It was fabulous. It was like another world to go to Mexico, just over the border, and the sea was wonderful, and just everything about it I really liked. Then many, 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 many years later, I hitchhiked down with my friend Bill Crook to Oaxaca because a friend of his had an apartment there that was available for us to stay in. So we just thought, the things you do when you're young, we thought, well, let's go stay in this friend's apartment. And that's what we did. But And then more serendipity or whatever, more chance, hazard. I was going, 40 years later, I was going to Belize from Brussels, thinking I might want to move to Belize.
Mm-hmm.
And to get to Belize, we stopped in Mexico City to change planes. And that was a revelation. After 12 years in Brussels to land in Mexico City, which I didn't really know that well at all, it was like, whoa. My friend who I was with didn't even go on to Belize as per our plan. He just stayed in Mexico City. I went on to Belize, spent 3 weeks there with another friend, and it was an adventure, but I decided it wasn't for me. I came back to Mexico and decided, yeah, this is where I want to be. And went back to Brussels, and a year later moved to Mexico. So again, I had no plans to move to Mexico at all. It just happened.
Like a new
Mexico can
adventure,
do that.
an adventure which kind of repeated itself
Yes.
unexpectedly. Like only now, it's like a permanent kind
Yeah.
of residence.
Yeah.
And speaking of some of the compositions on the new album, one is Danza de la Pluma.
Yes.
What does that mean? How does it translate? The dance of what is the
Well,
pluma?
pluma's feathers.
Feathers.
Feather.
It's something to do with tradition.
Oh yeah, it's an old traditional dance that they perform different points during the year in different towns around Oaxaca. But the thing is, it's just to watch is really fascinating because they have these huge headdresses,
Mm-hmm.
gigantic, made of feathers. I don't know how they do it, but they just dance for hours, bouncing up and down and doing these different movements with this huge headdress on and a whole costume. And there's a narrative there. I'm not an expert, but it has to do with the conquest of Mexico. And so there's the Spanish represented and the indigenous represented, and there's this whole narrative thing. But it goes on for hours and with breaks. But we saw a film from the 50s or something, black and white film, of one of the performances of this dance, and it was just really evocative. And so this was part of a larger film that we were making music for. So it's a soundtrack for a scene in a film, which is the danza del pluma in slow motion. So it had this rhythm, that we tried to capture in the song. And yeah, like I said in the record notes, that normally this would be a Cinema Domingo orchestra song because it was the same guys from Cinema Domingo, Julio and Ohama. But I just wanted to use it on this album because I thought it fit. There's that one in Pyramids also, which is another scene in the same film of Pyramids, and with the same guys from Cinema Domingo. So both of these instrumental pieces, which are really soundtracks, are included.
Mm-hmm. And also a song, you refer to this other town where people managed to fight corruption. How did you find out about that story? And it's obviously possible to achieve that level of utopia, if that's the proper word. How is it going these days? Like, can you please tell us the name? I forgot. I'm sorry.
Cheran.
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 Yeah.
Cheran. Cheran. Yeah, you can find information on the YouTube and things on the internet. How did I find out about this? I don't remember the details, but when I found out, I was totally excited and amazed. And I knew I wanted to somehow, get involved. I haven't been there yet. We have plans to go visit. It's not easy to visit, but I hope to go there at some point. And anyway, a friend of mine in Mexico City, he said we should go there and make a video for the song. I'm sure he said he thinks the people in the town would appreciate, the fact that I made this song. I hope that's true. Well, that remains to be seen. But anyway, when I found out, I thought, wow, this is great. This is a Zapatista idea, to it's an autonomous zone. It's an autonomous town. And like the same idea that the Zapatistas have been doing for 30 years in Chiapas. When the Zapatistas started in 93, they thought they were setting an example for the rest of the country to follow. Unfortunately, they inspired many people and many groups all over the world, there's no doubt, especially in Europe, but not many people followed their example. This is one. This town was besieged by the cartel, the drug cartel, for years. But they don't only deal with drugs now. They deal with everything, with wood, with lumber, with construction, with hotels, with everything, import, export. And so in this town, they were stealing the trees. They were cutting the trees down from the hillside every day, taking them out in trucks. Until one day, the women of the town decided to put a stop. They just sat down in front of this truck that was loaded with lumber. They just sat down. And then the church bells started ringing. And then everybody in the town came out. And finally, they were united and they threw out the criminals and the police and the government because they were all in it together, which is often the case. And so, these people did what anybody can do, what any town can do, because many, many, many towns have the same problem. Many countries have the same problem. And so I just wanted to put my little grain of sand in this situation that I found to be very inspiring and important that people know about,
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Even in Mexico, many people don't know, so.
Interesting. Because of one other musician once said in an interview, Dave Ball of Soft Cell, he said, to change things, you either have to be a politician or a terrorist. So this is like a nice alternative between these two unbearable extremes. What do you think? I guess obviously it's possible, right?
Well, yeah, in
If
this
people
case,
work hard.
it would be community, between the terrorist and the politician is community,
Yeah.
Which
But
is big in Mexico.
should there be like a small difference between being a terrorist and a politician these days? Because
Yeah,
everyone's
anymore
kind of,
there's not much
yeah,
difference.
yeah, sadly so.
Yeah.
And speaking about your cultural activism, what does that imply in your situation today, especially today? Like, in what way are you a cultural activist in, let's say, practice, like where you live, and how do you act to change things or
Cultural
contribute
activist.
to a better change? Like,
In terms of culture, well, let's see, what could aside from throwing parties where we show movies and play music and whatnot and don't charge admission, what else could I say? I mean, I've been involved with different groups in Oaxaca, where I live, the state of Oaxaca, the city of Oaxaca. Um, I don't know if you call it activism, but I did work with a group of young musicians from the mountains, indigenous kids, for like 6 or 7 years. They had a band. There's bands all over Oaxaca, Philharmonic, like in the Balkans, like in Croatia and Serbia, brass bands with woodwinds, but winds, mostly wind instruments. It's huge. Every town has at least two, and they're all real good. And so, knowing what was going on here with all these famous bands from Romania and Macedonia and etc., said, why doesn't that happen in Mexico? How come nobody hears about these bands outside of their little towns? So I talked to a friend of mine, a partner in Mexico City, who I've been working with for many years, and he said, why don't you ask for a government grant to work with one of these bands? I didn't think it was going to happen. It did happen. This was like 2007 or 8. We got a support from the government, and so I started working with these kids. We gave classes. We started composing music together. We made records together. We made videos. We brought them out of their town to the city of Oaxaca, where they were a huge success. Then to Mexico City, then to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And, all the goals we had set in this project, we met in a big way, which, it was kind of obvious that would happen because they're really talented kids and the music they play is really interesting and original. We also did music together, composed together. But anyway, we ended up going to Russia, Perm, Russia in 2012, a festival there dedicated to Mexico. And now the project ended and they continue, but I don't work with them anymore. So that was a sort of activism, to work. They live in a little town way up in the mountains and stuff, to work with these kids and bring them down into the world. And now they play in big festivals in
Great.
Mexico, and they go all over the place outside of Mexico as well. So I like to think that, me and my partner were responsible for that in some way. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the most obvious example of cultural activism I could think of.
Yeah, great. And speaking of, you mentioned Russia, and you did the adaptation of the waltz of
Yeah.
Shostakovich. How did this come about? And I have read something you mentioned that today, considering the circumstances and all regarding the war in Ukraine, that Russia is suddenly not something to talk about, but still you dared to do something that would refer to a Russian composer on the new album.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Well,
For the time being, like this particular, for this particular
yeah, that
occasion.
was one reason. I mean, the first reason was my partner proposed that song. He really likes that valse, and in Mexico it's very well known because when a girl reaches 15 years old and they have a huge party, their parents throw a party, and one of the events at the party is a dance, and one of the dances is a waltz, and the waltz is always Shostakovich waltz number 2, and so everybody in Mexico knows that. But my Sergio, he said to me, "Why don't you do this song?" I thought, "What? Well, why not?" And then I thought of Russia, and I thought, well, yeah, it'll be a good idea to do something positive about
Yeah,
Russia.
sure. Because in the past you did also Ninochka, which is
Sure,
a
sure,
reference, so
sure.
it's not the first time for you
No.
to. Was there any other moment where you referred to kind of Russian, let's say, melody or in any song apart from the waltz?
Well, Eisenstein, we did a soundtrack for Viva Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
Sergei Eisenstein,
Mm-hmm.
unfinished film. We toured with that for years with my band Nine Rain from Mexico
Mm-hmm.
City. You know about that.
I heard of it, but sadly didn't.
Yeah, we played in Europe.
Forgive me.
At that same festival, in fact, with the Banda Mije, they're called the Banda Mije, the kids from the mountains of Oaxaca. We also projected Que Viva Mexico, the Eisenstein, on a huge screen, and played the music live. And people were crying. I saw people crying in the audience because they had never seen this film by their paisano, their compatriot. They had never seen this film in Russia. They never seen. So that was amazing to perform that in Russia.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful.
Yeah, that was great.
And yes, when you perform like on the new album, also a cover version of David Bowie,
Yeah.
which means something, it's very special to you, Panic in Detroit. And one thing I read, a very interesting thing, you were once a member of the White Panthers. I must admit, I never heard of the White Panthers. So what were they doing, and what was your kind of role? What was the most radical thing you did when you were a member of the White Panthers or participated in? What was it like?
You never heard of John Sinclair?
Maybe the name rings a bell, but I wouldn't connect it to a phrase like the White Panthers.
Right. No, of course. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was actually well known without the White Panthers. John Lennon wrote a song about him with Yoko.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're aware of that. In 1972, I think. It Ain't Fair, John Sinclair. They gave him 10 for 2. He got 10 years in prison for 2 joints, 2 marijuana cigarettes. It was a big scandal. He was a political activist, cultural activist in Michigan. It wasn't Detroit, but it was Ann Arbor, which is near Detroit. Anyway, he started the White Panthers. And the White Panthers were an analog to the Black Panthers. Somebody asked Stokely Carmichael, I think it was, the Black Panthers, a white guy, he said, well, how can we, help you in the struggle? And he said, start your own party. And so that's sort of how the White Panthers started. It was a white person's analog to the Black Panther Party. But I have to say it was way more cultural. We were more interested in music and marijuana and, human rights and whatnot, and having a good time, as opposed to them being a little bit more serious. But so I always wondered what he was talking about, the Bowie in that song. And then finally I read an interview not so long ago where my suspicions were confirmed that yes, he was talking about John Sinclair, because it was right at that same time. Aladdin Sane came out in that same year, I think. And so I think it was Iggy in an interview was saying that, yeah, he was inspired. Bowie was inspired by the figure of John Sinclair. And the National People's Gang that he mentions in the song would obviously be the White Panther Party. And so anyway, when I realized, oh, okay, that's what it's about, and with my history in the White Panthers, I thought this was a connection too good to be true, too good to pass up. So I wanted to do an homage to the White Panthers and to Bowie, because that album was one of my favorites. Also, Aladdin Sane. It's the first album I heard of his. And so, yeah, the strings came together on that one.
So, also going back to the album before this one, El Hombre Invisible, where you have a song, Resist, and now as we were talking about all these things in terms of like resisting, of course, you stated like in that song you resist in your own small way. And to resist, you first must say no. You must learn to say no first. And is there a price for saying no? Like, in your experience, what was it like to resist, say no, and then face the consequences?
Well, yeah, there's always consequences. I haven't experienced anything serious in recent years, but during the 70s, protesting the war and going to jail, and then in the 90s protesting AIDS and going to jail, that kind of thing. But that's just part of the process, really. In terms of, if you really say no, if I really said no, then yeah, that would be much higher stakes, and I haven't gotten there yet. It's kind of the right time and the right place situation. How can I say? It's just the resisting I do is not really a threat at this point to anyone, so at some point it might become that. Then the stakes get higher, and the game becomes more dangerous. But no, right now it's more of a rhetorical thing, for me where I live. But things change quickly.
Hopefully not for the worse from what they already like changed to, I guess, at the moment. Like, yeah.
Somebody last night said that he thinks things are going to get better because kind of like things get so bad they have to get better, and that's kind of where we're at now. That's what he thinks.
Let's stay optimistic. I like to think that. Although some people say things are going to get worse, but hopefully not. Hopefully not. Hopefully we'll live our own lives. I mean, it made me sound selfish a bit. Say, hopefully we'll live our own lives to the end, at least on this level. But who knows? Yeah. So, And regarding the title of that album, The Invisible Man, in one of the interviews at the time, you mentioned something about the invisibility of the artist and the invisibility of records. What did you mean by that?
Of records.
I mean, of the artist and the records that he releases. Like, it was an
Oh,
interesting hint. What is the invisibility about? Like, what does that refer to?
well, I was kind of making a bad joke about how nobody knew. I made like 5 records in Oaxaca, and nobody knows them. And so they were all instrumental records. One of them was with this band of indigenous kids, 2 records with them. And they were all instrumental. And it was a soundtrack and Viva Mexico, etc. So that's what I was referring to. And when I made The Invisible Man, it had been a long time since I hadn't written lyrics and I hadn't sung any songs, and so that was one of the reasons I did it. But also just being invisible in terms of your lifestyle, in terms of your beliefs. Often you just are off the radar of most people, and I'm fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one day I just got on the bus and everybody's like this staring at their phones. I thought, okay, this means something. The world has really changed. And I said, you know what? I'm glad they're looking at their phones and not at me.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Yeah.
safer. I feel free because they're in their own stupid little world. They don't bother me. So
But
that's it.
does it frustrate you at times that the music doesn't reach the wider audience in that sense? Just the same. I mean, you enjoy your privacy, but at the same time, you wish that the music that you released is not so invisible.
Oh yeah, no, of course. That's the whole point is for people to listen. But yeah.
I mean, because we're living at a time where also like collective nostalgia is really constantly dominating, and people always look to the past work of someone, of the artist, and not paying attention to new music, new material, new contents, be it other work, not necessarily just music, I guess. But how does that, what do you think about that, like the nostalgia hype?
Well, we're all privy to nostalgia. This is part of human nature. But I have to say, on this tour, yes, people are always telling, I saw you in 1883, whatever. I mean, it's like every night I get that. But at the same time, people are really appreciating the new music. And more than once, people said they really liked the mix of the old and the new, that it worked very well. I heard this in Mexico too. So finally, maybe now at this stage of the game, almost the end of the game, end game, it's working. It's working. People are starting to listen to the new music. This tour was very successful. People really came out and they bought all the records and etc. And so maybe finally at the end of my career, I'm starting to be appreciated.
No, I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. With your new music just as well as your
That's what I mean. The
old
new music. I
music.
mean, the old
Yeah,
music.
yeah.
Okay, Tuxedomoon. Yeah, especially in Italy. It's
Although
very,
when
very
I
well
have
known.
to say, when you perform Tuxedomoon, it's not Tuxedomoon. It's not a bad remark. It's just that it fits into your work because all of the members are individually quite strong as artists. So it always reflects the music as such. It can be your own song and it can be a group song. Would that is that
Well,
maybe the reason why everyone, you and Blaine Reininger and possibly other members who perform solo, would approach from the same, let's say,
sure.
from their own kind of perspective, to put Tuxedomoon songs in their own environment and then present them as songs
Yeah.
by them, not by necessarily by the group. Would that be
Well, there's
like,
the element of truth. The songs that I do, me, are the pretty much songs that I wrote with Tuxedomoon. And with Peter. Like 59 to 1 was basically Peter and me, bass guitar, drums, and sax,
mhm,
voice. Muchos Colores, that was Tuxedomoon, but the words and the melody was from me. And what's the other one? Some Guys. That
mhm,
again, that was me and Peter and Luke. So I wouldn't do. And Home Away also was bass guitar and saxophones.
mhm.
So I only do songs that really, I had a big hand in, if not.
Mhm.
because also for logistical reasons, that I don't do songs with violin, obviously, or songs that that Blaine played on.
But would that make a difference if you do? Would that
Well,
cause any stir or anything like
no, not at all.
between?
He does songs
Yeah,
from Tuxedomoon also, and
because you continue to collaborate with Luke van Lieshout on your solo tours, and then performing with Blaine Reininger in Belgrade, which is a concert that is announced. And I mean, Tuxedomoon sadly no longer will be active due to circumstances in the past number of years where several members sadly passed away. Bruce Godalde again, Peter Principal. They died both the same year, am I?
No,
right?
16 and 17.
16 and 17. And in one of your interviews, you mentioned that there is no point for Tuxedomoon to continue, which is respectful in terms of the band and everyone else involved. But why am I mentioning this? What is your view of reunions when groups stop performing and they're absent from the public eye for many years and then they reappear? Would you prefer a legend or come back to life?
What did you call it?
A reunion.
A reunion.
Yeah.
Well, we did that. We did that in 1988.
Of course. I mean, but it was still fresh. But let's say when it's the time gap is quite big.
Yeah. We did, and then we did it again in 97. So yeah, we do reunions every 10 years. It's kind of over.
Okay.
We're over that. We're over that.
But if it would happen, like, would you prefer a legend to stay a legend or kill it off, like, by a new
I would prefer
with a new...
not to bring it back.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. And also collaborations on your new album, and you mentioned some people, but also interesting, like people like Ryan Weinstein. I must admit I haven't heard of him until I listened to your new album, and I actually then listened to his album. It's quite interesting.
Coffin Prick. It's called.
Yes,
Yeah.
very interesting name.
Yes.
But how did you come together? Like, how did you connect? And also two people from, I guess, if I understood, also live in Oaxaca, Zaman Almond, the vocalist, and Benjamin Anaya.
Yes.
How did these collaborations come?
And don't forget Mabe Frati.
Thank you.
She's a rising star. I just saw an article in The Guardian about her 2 days ago. She's out of... She lives in Mexico City, but she's on tour almost all year now. She's really becoming very successful.
These collaborations happened even before, or is it just this album, or also on a previous one, or?
No, it was on this album.
On this album.
I met Sarman in Mexico a few years ago, and she has a duo called Man in Motion. It's kind of low, what do they call it? Trip hop kind of thing. It's electronic, not really dance, but could be dance, but it's kind of low tempo, down tempo. With her partner who plays the synth. She plays synth also and sings. It's really quite good, Man in Motion. But then she is a performance artist. She works solo a lot. She does performances where she uses her voice in many different ways. And she does workshops periodically through the year, international workshops. People come to Mexico City and they do these classes. Anyway, we hit it off and we started doing stuff together. We did a version of A Quoi Ça Sert l'Amour, which I had done in the 80s on my album, Half Out, the Piaf song. It's a duet. The original is a duet with Edith Piaf and her boyfriend. So we did it. Me and Sarman did it. A version with her band Man in Motion, so it's more electronic. And then from then I invited her to participate on the album In This Very World. And by pure luck, she was on tour in Europe when I was in Brussels. So she came to Brussels and recorded. And Benjamin, I've known him for years. He's a guitar player and poet. He lives in Mexico City. He came to visit me in Oaxaca once a few years ago with his guitar, and we just started jamming. It might have been him. Or right around that time, I knew about Shadan anyway. And so he's an activist also, and involved in politics and whatever. And so we both decided to write that song to write a song about Sharan. So he just
Mm-hmm.
came up with these melodies, and I said, okay. And so yeah, it was him and me that wrote that song in my house in Oaxaca. Then I went to Mexico City to record it with him and Mabe Frati. I met through the same guy that introduced me to Sarman. She was just kind of recently arrived from Guatemala. She's from Guatemala, Mexico City, and my friend who produced a show of mine in Mexico City in a theater proposed her as an opening act. I said, sure. That's when I met her, and I really liked what she was doing, and invited her to participate on the album too. And she plays a solo and Sharan
Mm-hmm.
cello solo. She plays cello and sings, and so yeah, like that. Just a lot of musicians in Mexico, and I was fortunate to meet these particular ones.
Do these people also like contact you first, or you meet in person, or is it also like distance kind of collaboration,
No, I met
communication
them all
in
in person.
person? And with Ryan, if I understood, it was more like a
Yeah.
distance.
Ryan was another story.
Yeah.
I didn't know him, and I got a message on Facebook with work, with the song "Work,"
Mm-hmm.
and he said, "I hear you on this. I hear your voice on this, or something." I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know who he was, but I thought it was an interesting way to meet somebody. He sent me a song. He said, "I hear you on this." Okay, so I listened to it, and I thought he meant a saxophone solo. Because most
Mm-hmm.
people think of me on a sax. So I played a sax. I said, "Oh, it's not bad." And then I had some lyrics that I didn't use on the new album, and I tried the lyrics with the music. And I said, "Oh, this works pretty good." In the end, I liked it, and so I told him, "I want to use this on my album if you
It's
don't mind."
nice,
He said,
yeah.
"No, no, no,
Yeah.
I'm using it on my album." And so I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" I said, "Maybe we can release it on both albums." And of course, that's what happened. But Mark was not too thrilled about that. I mean, it's kind of unusual
Mm-hmm.
to release the same song on two different albums,
Yeah,
two different publishers, two different companies.
yeah, that
But
can be tricky.
yeah,
Can be
it was
tricky.
tricky, but somehow we did it. His version is a tiny bit different. When you heard it, Sarman is not on it.
Mm-hmm.
The guitar player is different, etc. But it's basically the same song.
In a cryptic kind of way, you actually interacted with a stranger. A stranger was a character from a Tuxedomoon song back in the day, and then a stranger approached you with this,
Yes,
like, to
yes.
collaborate, and it's a nice thing. Like you accepted it. I mean, are you prone to do this again, or not
Well, I want to
really?
work with him.
No, not necessarily him, but anyone who would probably get in touch like this that you
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
happens. It happens. People ask me for, usually, like I say, for a sax or something.
Hmm.
Sometimes for a voice or whatever. But yeah, it's always long distance. Anyway, I went to LA in January and met him and played two shows with him and his band, you see, because
Hmm.
he'd been hounding me to come back to California. And it's like, finally, I gave in.
Hmm.
And he set everything up, a date in Oakland and a date in Los Angeles. And I went up 3 days, rehearsed 3 days with him and his band. They were great. They already knew the songs, etc. And so it went really well. It was yet another version of these songs with other musicians. We went to Oakland and Los Angeles, and so I got to know him and his guys really well. And I like what he does. It's funny. It's really different. And so we have plans to work together, continue working together. He's working on a new album now, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah,
So,
thanks.
okay, and a question, a little digression, like as we're sitting in this museum, which kind of uh, keeps the memory of computers and technological gadgetry alive. The question would be, what was your first encounter with a computer? How and when did it happen? And can you tell us about,
Jesus.
because of the electronic music being present in your opus and computers also in that sense? Was technology more something that you embraced, or by using it, were you thinking about it in some different way, regardless of the use? If I asked you this, like, was it also a form of critique towards technology? regardless of the use.
Was what a critique?
Like if you use something like a computer or some device which is like technologically advanced or something, was that also like, a bit of criticizing technology or embracing it? Why I ask you this, for example, Laurie Anderson did this. She was using technology, but she wasn't embracing it. She was criticizing it through her use of like the effects and all. It was almost like a warning.
Mm-hmm.
Are you more uh, like open to use technology or avoid it? Like in your music these days,
Well,
especially, it all sounds quite organic.
everybody I know works with computers. I do not. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I work with a clarinet, a saxophone, keyboards, like that. I record on a recorder, a digital recorder. You know, people have been telling me for years I should do this, I should do that, and now the new one is Appleton. You should
Mm-hmm.
use Appleton. It's great. I'm sure it is great. I just, I use the computer to write music. I have a program to write
Mm-hmm.
notes and then print them out to give to musicians. That's as far as I go.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it. It's not me. I don't use computers, but everybody uses computers in the end. All music you hear is made by computers. You go to the studio, you don't record on tape, you record on a computer. Cut and paste and the whole bit. All records are made that way, so there's no escape.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
I
I don't
mean,
have a problem
including
with that.
your own in the
Of
final
course,
stages, yeah.
everything. So it's like, now you can see on the screen, the computer screen, you see the sax solo's in orange. It's this little square in orange, and the trumpet is here in blue. And it's become a whole different reality. You see the music, and you can arrange the music visually. This is insane. This was unheard of 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so time, time is space. It's like in the what is that opera? This is where time becomes space. Is it Parsifal or something? Wagner.
Mm-hmm.
This is where time becomes space. Well, we learned that a long time ago in electronic music because time is space. This amount of magnetic tape makes this amount of sound, of music.
Mm-hmm.
So like 1 inch is 1 second of sound, right? 10
Mm-hmm.
inches is 10 seconds. So time becomes space.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. I've never seen anybody talk about that before. And so it's the same in the computer, but now you see it on a screen virtually. Before it was physical pieces of tape that you would cut up and stick together.
Do you think it's less exciting now that you see it on screen, or because you can make corrections, you can always?
It's much easier. It's
It's
much
much easier.
accessible.
Is
and,
it too easy?
it might be because if you listen to, but the music was shit 50 years ago and it's shit now. So I don't think it has to do with that so much,
Mm-hmm.
really. I really don't think that's true. And there's a lot of probably a good music coming out because it is so easy. People that have ideas and that don't necessarily want to study music for 20 years before they make a composition. So I don't know. It's dialectics, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not good, not all good, not all bad. There's good and there's bad.
Mm-hmm. But going back to that first encounter with a computer, if you can say anything.
I don't know
Like,
when that was. It must have been when to use it for email,
okay.
not for music.
So what? Yeah.
Me personally,
Mm-hmm.
my personal use of computers was for that,
Mm-hmm. But music.
and no, for video because in 2006 or something, me and a friend bought a mini Mac,
Mm-hmm.
which don't exist anymore. It's a Mac computer that was especially good for video editing, and we took a class in video editing, and so we had this computer. That's what I bought it for. It was to make videos, and now I use it for everything. But it was made for. I didn't buy it for music. I bought it for video.
Okay. Thank you very much for the interview. I hope the questions were okay.
Sure.
And thank you for the answers. It was really amazing to hear the stories. And very much appreciated to get into the work and stories behind the songs and all. So hoping to see you again in some near future or
I
in a
hope
couple
so.
of years. So
I really hope so.
please
Yeah.
visit us again, and
I'd like to come for holidays sometime.
please do.
If holidays still exist, you know.
Well, they do. They do.
Somewhere,
It depends. It depends on how you organize your time, I guess.
Of course. Yeah.
So best of luck with your forthcoming tour and the
Thanks
new
a lot.
album. And
Thank you.
hopefully, as I said, we'll see you again sometime, because it's great. The music is great, and thank you for the music. So
Well, I've played. I think it's the fourth time I've played in Rijeka. It's a very a lot of support here. Very good public, you know, good audience.
great.
I think the first time was in the '90s with Blaine Reininger
Hmm.
in Rijeka, before Sveto.
That was the time of the 100 Years of Music,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the most beautiful openings on the album, I have to say. Is it something? Is it live in Portugal or something? Or is
Yes,
yeah?
Lisbon. Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful opening piece, which is one of my favorites, I have to
Ah,
say.
what is it? Iberia, I think.
I'm sorry, I forgot the name, but it's just the melody. It's just
Okay.
great. So one of my
Well, we did it
favorites.
here in Rijeka
It was
30
confusing
years
because
ago.
I thought it was Tuxedomoon for a long time.
Okay.
Before, many years ago, when I first heard it, I couldn't track it, and I couldn't trace that piece. And then at some point, a friend uh, lent me a copy of the album, which was 100 Years of Music,
Yeah.
and it in the end it turned out it was you and Blaine who did.
Which is basically Tuxedomoon, right? So you weren't far off. Yeah.
Never mind, but still, also as I said, solo work and Tuxedomoon music, which kind of blends together sometimes that you
Yeah.
don't notice. And this is a beautiful thing because, as I said, the individuality of each member
Mm.
comes to the fore. So it's
Mhm.
always kind of neutral and timeless and always reinterpreted in its interesting
Mhm.
interesting ways where it kind of always gets something extra. It's always like for the first time, like hearing it always sounds fresh. So
Mm.
you make
Great.
timeless music. So as I said, thanks.
Thank you.
So that'll be it.